This is rental car number 26. It's the 2017 Cadillac XTS. I have never driven a Cadillac, so I was pretty excited to give this one a spin, though I was a little disappointed to see that Edmunds gave this car a 2 out of 5 and Car and Driver gave it a 3 out of 5. Nevertheless, it's still a $46,000 car, so I was pretty excited to take it for a spin. And before we jump inside, just some quick stats. This car has over 300 horsepower, gets 18 miles per gallon in the city and 28 on the highway, which isn't great, but my guess is if you're buying a Cadillac, gas mileage probably isn't at the top of your list. Jumping inside, this is a beautiful interior. Leather all around and some nice silver inlays that remind me a lot of the brand new Nissan Maxima. You get a very nice sized center console and the entire thing is a touchscreen. There's also some really nice buttons on the steering wheel that help you navigate through the entertainment features on the vehicle. There is a very nice heads-up display with full color right above the steering wheel. And then some nice design touches throughout the vehicle with just a little bit of wood on top of the gear shift and on some of the panels throughout the car. Jumping into the back seat, you get a lot of legroom back here. There's dedicated vents for your passengers and even seat warmers for them to enjoy. I actually sat in the back seat and did some work on a laptop, and I can tell why this car is so frequently used for limo drivers. It's pretty comfortable back there. Let's switch gears and talk a little bit about tech. First, there's no key in this car. You just get a really nice key fob. This is really well designed. It has a beautiful weight to it, and it's probably one of the nicer key fobs I've interacted with lately. And obviously, because you don't have a key, you get a nice push button start. Nothing special here, but the button is at a nice location right next to the steering wheel. To the left of the steering wheel, there's also an electronic parking brake control. It's in the form of a button that's pretty similar to the standard window controls. One thing I didn't like is that when you engage the parking brake, you have to manually disengage it before you can drive the vehicle. In some of the other vehicles, like the Chrysler Pacifica, as long as you shift the car into drive, the parking brake automatically disengages. But that's not the case here with the Cadillac. Switching back over to the steering wheel, you really do get some very nice buttons on the left and right side of the steering wheel to interact with a lot of the car's features. On the left side, you get the cruise control buttons along with the heated steering wheel control. And on the right side, you get the volume controls and other buttons to engage with the entertainment features. These buttons are really easy to use and I really like them quite a bit. So let's switch over to the heads-up display and let me turn the car on so you can get a real feel for what this looks like. I don't think my camera does a good job of displaying this. It's actually a very crisp display. You get your speed limit on the right and your fuel economy on the left. When you're driving, your miles per hour is really big and easy to see, and the speed limit is very crisp and easy to notice. Additionally, when you're parking the car, there are sensors all over to give you warnings when you're getting too close to objects, and you also get this little feature on the heads-up display to let you know what's going on. But let's switch over to the center console because it's fairly large and pretty interesting. So you get the touchscreen on top, which is pretty typical, but then all these buttons on the bottom are also a touchscreen. But I'll get to that in a second. Let's look at the main touchscreen so you can really get a feel for what it's like. There are no dedicated buttons on the left and right of the screen. The buttons you're seeing here are for other features that are completely unrelated to the touchscreen. So to navigate through all the menus, you do have to use the touchscreen itself to get where you want to go. I'm usually not a fan of this system because I think it's hard to do when you're driving, but after being with this car for a little while, I found it pretty easy to get where I needed to go within the menu. One feature I really liked on the touchscreen was the ability to direct tune to a radio station. So just for example, if you want to listen to 91.5 FM, you type in the actual number, 91.5, and then the touchscreen will automatically tune the radio to that channel. I thought this was pretty cool. Something else that's kind of cool is that all the buttons below to let you navigate with the climate controls and the volume and stuff, they're all touchscreens. So you can just click and drag your finger across to adjust things, which is pretty nice. And jumping outside the vehicle, you also get your standard keyless entry buttons on the doors. They're available on all the doors. As long as you have the key fob in your pocket, you can just step up, double tap one of those buttons, and then you can enter the car automatically. But let me end with one negative. Unfortunately, there's no blindside detection on this car. The blinking light you see is actually the turn signal. Frankly, for a $46,000 car, I think that blindside detection should come standard. and I'm pretty disappointed in Cadillac for not including this feature. But enough negative. Let's switch gears again and let's talk about storage. Let's start by going back to the rear of the vehicle and taking a look at the trunk space. This is a pretty wide car. It's 73 inches wide, so you get a very large trunk space. The rear wheels do not impede into the trunk space, so you really do get a very large, very rectangular space, which I think is really nice. You can get a lot back here without any problems. There's also a compartment in the very back of the car, right in the trunk, with your spare tire, and then some additional space to store some odds and ends. Jumping back into the car, into the front of the cabin, you do get some nice space up here. I think my favorite is this sort of hidden compartment that's underneath the volume and climate controls. You just sort of pull up a little bit on this panel and it slides up automatically and reveals a pretty large space. I carry around a pretty large cell phone and I had no problems getting my phone to fit in this compartment, which is pretty nice to see. And then directly below that compartment at the very base of the center console, you get a small storage area right here with some nice space to maybe keep some change and also a DC outlet right here. And then right next to that compartment, next to the gear shift, you do get two cup holders that sort of hide behind this small panel. And then to the left of the steering wheel, you get this small compartment right here, which is actually pretty deep. I was able to get my cell phone in and out of here pretty easily, along with a couple other odds and ends. You also get your standard storage space underneath the center armrest. There's nothing really special here. It is nice to see that there's a light inside here and a pretty deep storage container that I think you could really take advantage of. It's a little difficult to see, but there is a DC power adapter right here along with two USB ports kind of buried underneath there. And then up top above the center console, you do have plenty of buttons for lights and other features, but there is no sunglass holder, which I was a little bit surprised to see. And speaking of surprised, the glove box is a little bit strange. I actually tried to find the hatch for it for about 2 or 3 minutes until I realized that there's actually a button on the center console that you have to press to open up the glove box. Now, this is kind of weird, but my guess is that if you lock the vehicle, then the glove box is completely locked up too, so no one has access to it unless they have the key fob. It's kind of an interesting feature, and I don't know if you can see, but there is 2 small shelves in there as well, which is kind of nice. Shifting to the back seat, you do get your standard sort of center armrest that folds down, and it's kind of nice to see that Cadillac has included some storage spaces in here, and then also 2 cup holders for your passengers. So that's storage. Let's switch over and talk a little bit about comfort. And let's start by going back to the front seat and talking about all the ways that you can sort of orient the driver's seat. You do get electronic controls to adjust the car, and that includes lumbar support, which I'm a pretty big fan of. And I'm happy to report that Cadillac did not skimp out, and you get the exact same controls for the passenger seat, which is pretty rare nowadays. And then going back to the driver's seat, the steering wheel is fully adjustable with electronic control, which is really nice because it gives you the ability to adjust the steering wheel just ever so slightly while you're driving, which I found to be really nice. So you can adjust it up and down and then also telescope it in and out, and there's actually quite a bit of distance here, so you can really make the car comfortable. On the steering wheel, there's also a button to heat up the steering wheel, which is really nice. I found that it got really warm, especially towards the top and on the sides of the steering wheel. And then switching over to the center console, the Cadillac XTS has some pretty interesting climate controls. You can adjust everything through the touchscreen, and it's pretty easy to do this. You don't have to go too deep in any menus. But then there are also dedicated buttons on the bottom, and these are also touchscreen items. So you can sort of tap your finger on each button like you would with a standard sort of control, but it's a touchscreen, so you can also swipe your buttons like I showed you before with the volume controls. It's interesting. I mean, it works, but honestly, I'd rather just have standard buttons. Let's jump into the back seat. I think I mentioned this before, but there's a lot of legroom back here. I'm 6 feet tall. This is with the front seat pushed back pretty far, and I have a ton of legroom. There's also dedicated vents back here, which is nice, and then actual heated seats for your passengers, which is pretty nice to see. All right, so let's close things out by talking about handling. Honestly, When I jumped into this car, I expected it to drive kind of like a boat. I mean, Cadillacs kind of have a notorious reputation for being big cars that are kind of difficult to drive. But that is not the case with the XTS. So I had this car for over 2 days, and I put at least 400 miles on it. A lot of that was on the highway, but I did plenty of suburban driving, and I was pleasantly surprised. This car doesn't turn quite as nicely as, say, the 2017 Nissan Maxima or the Ford Fusion, but it drives really smoothly and accelerates really nicely on the interstate. I've never driven a limo, but I kind of imagine this is how it feels. It's a big car, it's a smooth ride, and it feels pretty good. If you're looking for something real sporty, I would stay away, but if you're in the mood for sort of a big sedan, I'd highly recommend taking this one out for a spin. All right, so that's the 2017 Cadillac XTS. After spending some good amount of time with this car, I think I'm going to give it 4 stars. This is a really nice vehicle. Though honestly, if I had 46 grand to drop on a sedan, I'd probably wait for the Tesla Model 3. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you'll join me next time when I continue my quest at reviewing 100 rental cars.